Hi everyone, welcome back to another scrapbook process video, and thank you for joining me again today. I am making my second layout using the Hike More 49 in Market collection. I am loving the way these layouts turned out, and I can honestly easily say that I am definitely a 49 in Market fan now. I had a lot of comments on my other video using this collection that a lot of you are 49 in Market fans, so I'm very happy, and I definitely will be keeping my eye out on their collections. If you haven't seen their new collection coming out, what is it, Everywhere? 49 in Market Everywhere, something like that. Um, I think that one is a really good one if you are in need of a travel collection. It looks really pretty, so I might have to go and pick up some of that one. Only because I have a vacation coming up that me and my husband are going on. So I think it would be perfect for that. However, let's get to the layout now. Wait, well, you can obviously see that I have punched out a bunch of squares. I just used my 1-inch square punch, and I mostly use scraps. I tried to use only scraps at this point in time. However, I am going to run out of squares, and I am going to need to go back and add and punch some 12 by 12 papers, which was a little bit harder to do, but I am definitely trying to be in the frame of mind to not save paper, and know that there's going to be more pretty paper in the future. So the other thing you might notice that I'm using is, I think this is called a quilting ruler. I saw another YouTuber using it, and I don't know, I really thought it would be really easy to help line stuff up. And for something like this, I feel like this is a lot easier to use to line everything up than a T-square ruler would be, because I know if I used a T-square ruler, they would have been way crooked, and these ones are crooked. The ones on the top and bottom do not line up like at all. Um, but I'm not too worried about it, because by the time the photos are there, it kind of separates the top and the bottom, and therefore you don't even notice that they're off a little bit. So kind of what I'm doing here is I'm making the frame to where all the squares will be going. I wanted to kind of get the outside part glued down, and that way I could kind of know where to place the inside pieces, if that makes sense. I am following a sketch by Scrapbook Generation. I cannot share the sketch with you. I apologize, because it is paid content, but I do follow the sketch, I think, almost as close as I can without, I mean, obviously my photo is going to be tilted a little bit different way, or my squares might be a little bit off, and so on and so forth, but I do follow the layout or the sketch very closely. The other thing I'm going to be doing here, obviously I'm trying to make sure my colors are spread around, so which is another reason I had to go and punch more of the papers. I do have extra squares left over in the end, but not very many. And I do believe that I have a sketch pulled for the next layout that uses 1-inch squares as well, so I'm not worried about it. I will eventually get those used. The one thing I also did as well was I made sure to use some removable adhesive when I first started. So now I am going back and I'm adding glue. And don't worry, I don't make you watch me glue all of these down. Just trying to add little bits and pieces in here for you to watch. But I have also inked my edges with my brown Close to My Heart ink. So I did take the time to ink all the edges to these squares. I do feel like it really, adds a little something. But the other thing I made sure to do was I didn't add squares, obviously, where the photos were going to go. That would have been, in my opinion, a waste of more paper. If it was all scraps, I probably wouldn't have cared. But it was, yeah, I just, there's no reason to add them behind there, because like I said, I was already going into my 12 by 12 papers. Now you can see here, this is where I did mess up a little bit, and this is why I can't say I exactly followed the sketch, but I did, for the most part, at least try. But these photos are supposed to line up with all of the squares, and I don't know if I cut my photos wrong or what happened. I probably the spacing was a little different, but I do end up just trimming a little bit off of the top and bottom photo, and it works out just fine. I am going to trim just a tiny bit more on this one here, and you're going to see me use my little Cricut spatula just to make an indent on where to cut it. And probably should have, sometimes, I do this and I probably should, and I know I'm telling myself that I need to measure it a little better, because even here I cut it a little too much, just like, but I always do that. I never learned my lesson on that one. But it actually works out because I feel like the little bit of space that's between all the photos now on this side mimics the little bit of space that's between all the squares. So it's really, it's fine with me that there's a little bit of space. And once I get those glued down, then I am going to pull out a brown frame. When I saw this sketch and knew, put the photos, figured out what photos I wanted to go where, I knew that I really liked this frame and I thought it would be perfect. They have a journaling spot in that section. So it basically just mimics that. And that is where I'm going to add my journaling. But instead of just putting it on a plain piece of cardstock, I did cut into this paper with, it has like a pattern on one side and then a bunch of like, they're not all the same size cut aparts. They're different kinds of cut aparts, you could probably see. But yeah, I decided to pull one just to bring some of that pattern in, and I really like the way it looks. So again, I'm going to apologize. I forgot to move my camera. I did all these layouts a couple weeks ago, and so I just need to remember to move my camera um, to get you guys more on the screen, but I do try to be mindful of that. So now I'm picking out, I did want to mat these photos on the sketch as well. They also have mats, and as much as I loved some of those pattern papers, I didn't want something too busy because of all the squares, and I didn't want something too light because I wanted it to actually stand out. So as much as I loved the other side, I really love that side. You can see I'm like contemplating like, oh, but what I decided with that was to cut off the side that maybe I didn't love as much. Well, okay, I started out doing it that way and then I think I forgot, but whatever. It is what it is. But I went for it because I knew that this brown would stand out better than any of the other pattern papers that I had. So I went ahead with that brown, and I did also ink the edges of it. All those, I think they're 3¼ by, no, maybe they're not 3¼ by 3¼ I don't remember. They're either 3¼ by or 3¼ by 4¼ or 4½ by 3½. I can't remember, but another way to kind of help my photos stand out on those mats is I decided to go ahead and mount them on, or give them a tiny white border as well before putting them on the brown. And it really helps them pop. And I think it also picks up on the white cardstock border that goes around the entire layout and all of those squares. So um, I had to go sharpen my knife, by the way. That was one of those knife things you can break off and get a sharper piece. So I asked my husband, here, can you break this off for me? Just so that's why it wasn't cutting so well. It had nothing to do with the perfect layer rulers. If you are struggling with your perfect layer rulers, maybe you need a little bit sharper of a cutting knife, just something to keep in mind. So here I'm going to lay down the photos, and I do have to bring in, before I say that, will say I did have to bring in a few more squares, but luckily I had a few leftovers, and some of them might be very similar to the colors next to them, but I'm not letting that bother me because, again, most of them will be covered up, and a lot of them will be covered up by like the cluster as well. So there is another photo on this layout, and I mentioned a little bit of this in the last layout, but in case you didn't see that layout, one of the pictures is going to be on both the left-hand page and the right-hand page. So I am going to have to cut that picture. So if you are cutting a picture to go on both the right-hand and left-hand page, just make sure you are not cutting through something important. You definitely don't want to cut through somebody's face. A body part, like, maybe if their legs kind of stick into the side and you cut a little bit of their leg off, not that big of a deal, but you definitely want to Make sure that you don't cut through the space or cut in between the two people if it's a group of people. If you have to cut into a group of people, just again use that same thought process that you don't want to cut through somebody's face. So, and if you do have a group of people, I would really suggest trying your hardest to not cut, not have to cut through a group of people is kind of what I was going to say with that. But anyways, yeah, just things to keep in mind. And if it's not a picture of a bunch of people, like mine is just a picture of a waterfall, which is why I don't mind cutting through it. But at the same time, I also made sure to cut through part of the picture that wasn't the focal part of the picture. So the focal part of that picture is the waterfall. So I made sure not to cut that part, if that makes sense. I hope that helps you guys if you struggle with things like that. Yeah, I hope that can help a little bit. So I used all the really nice fern leaves on the last layout I did. So I'm going to try and use these other leaves. I don't know what kind of leaves these are, but I'm going to use these on this layout instead. Um, I I'm going to make 3 clusters on this layout. I can't remember if that follows the sketch or not, but it makes no difference either way, I guess. But I also was able to pull in that little viewfinder piece that I tried to use on the last layout that I had already cut. And luckily the pieces fit perfectly for this layout. So I got that used up. So again, not afraid to use it. And yeah, I'm just tucking in a few leaves. I made sure to add some kind of leaves to each cluster. My title is going to be Adventure Awaits. I'm going to add a little something to that I will talk about in a few minutes. And another thing I am going to get on this layout is some of the pink color that I wasn't able to use on the last layout. So I had mushrooms. There is, mushrooms my husband took on the tree. He thought it was really interested the way they were growing. So I am going to use, which is weird because you wouldn't think mushrooms on a scrapbook layout, right? I mean, but here it is, the second layout where I'm actually using these mushrooms. And so I'm choosing the mushrooms, or at least one of them, a couple of them. I try to use ones that are that reddish kind of color. They're not the exact same pink, but they definitely bring that pinkish red color around the page. So that's one reason why I am using those ones. And you may have seen me take the chipboard. So a couple of them were chipboard pieces. You may have seen me take them and pull off some of their layers. So if you want to use a piece of chipboard, but it's too thick for where you wanted to place them, you can cut a little bit of the layers down, or not cut, sorry, peel off some of the layers from the chipboard so that it's um, a little bit flatter to the page. Just maybe kind of like they say, measure twice, cut once. Just maybe do like a think about it twice. I don't know how you would say it, but just peel a little bit before, if you're afraid and never done that before and you don't want to ruin your chipboard, just do a little bit at a time. It's multiple layers of, the chipboard stuff. So don't be too afraid of it. And sometimes it doesn't come out super even and sometimes it does, but I don't let it worry me. As long as it's not thick and it'll fit where I want it to go, then I'm happy. And I think with that mushroom that's in the middle cluster currently, I might have added a piece of foam tape under just one of the leaves. I can't really remember, but the other thing I'm not sure if you can notice at this point, I have sewn around the entire layout around kind of like the border of everything. You will see that in the still shot photos. It did call for that on the sketch. It's pretty hard to see, and I did it off camera, but the sketch also called for a lot more stitching around the squares themselves, but I didn't, they were so busy as it was that I didn't want to go there with all of that. So And anyways, I'm adding another mushroom to this cluster. So I'm going to have 3 clusters. I'm going to have the one on the left by the title, the one on the right here by the journaling, and the one there in the middle. Now, I will mention this piece here that I'm kind of messing around with because that brings the pink over. I really like it where it is right now. I think it looks really cute, really pretty there. Brings that pink over perfectly. But I have to tell you, I'm going to do my journaling, and I type my journaling up on that box. That frame is not currently glued down to the paper. I just used temporary adhesive with it. And I completely forgot to mark where that little box was. So unfortunately, it does get, I still add it to that cluster over there, but I was a little bit irritated at myself that I didn't remember to mark around that. So anyways, just a little note there for when you see the still shot photos at the end, I did have to move it. And then also underneath the title here, I added this little word tag and it says lead the way. And I really like this here because to me, it looks like it says adventure awaits, lead the way. And so I feel like that's my title. And I don't know, I like that because it's my daughter going with my husband. My husband hikes all the time, my daughter not so much. So I feel like it was kind of like her saying, hey, lead the way. But anyways, I'm just looking at the little bit of stuff I have left, and I did try to add some butterflies, but they just weren't, I, I don't know, they just weren't doing it for me. I think they just camouflaged a little bit too much with the leaves, and tried a few of the bugs, but they just didn't sit very well in the clusters. So the last thing I am going to end up bringing out is this sheet that I almost forgot that I had, but it is part of this collection. It's like this, I guess, epoxy stickers you would call these. And I do end up using an epoxy sticker in each cluster. I think on the left is maybe a bird. In the middle cluster, I got more mushrooms used, so that's always good. And I can't remember what I added to the right-hand cluster. Uh, but there you go. And I will suggest, if you use these epoxy stickers, adding a little bit of extra adhesive underneath them. They did seem to stick down really good to start, but then after a few minutes, they moved a little easier. So I definitely added some liquid glue behind all of them. And then I'm also going to add 3 of these epoxy dots in each cluster area. And I kind of play around a little bit with the colors of each one. And I wasn't really sure because the epoxy colors are just a little bit different than the papers. I was a little unsure how it looked, but again, trying to use things up this year, so I didn't want to save them, and I didn't get any of them used on the first layout, so I went ahead and just kind of went for it and glued each one of those down in my clusters. All right, and that is basically going to be my layout. You will see in the still shot photos here at the end the journaling that I did. And I thought I typed it, but apparently I wrote it out, so that is totally fine. But I did get that piece on there. I just had to move it a little bit. And otherwise, I absolutely love this layout. I think it turned out great. This has been a fun collection to use, and I can't wait to do more with it. So I hope you guys like the layout and the video. And I hope you guys have a great afternoon, day, evening, whatever time it is for you. See you next time.